Okay. Do you want to just... okay. YouTube's on. Yeah. Okay, Phil. I'm just getting my notes in front of me here, and then away we go. So this now is going out on YouTube, but it will be then recorded over here on our Roadcaster, and then it'll go out on our show tonight. So I'll just give you a very short little sting. It's about 3.5 seconds, and then we go straight into it. Okay.
Perfect.
Phil Craig is the man behind Cape Independence. Well, I'm not sure if you're the only one behind Cape Independence, Phil, but it certainly seems like your movement is gathering momentum.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to be with you again. For sure, I'm definitely not the only one behind Cape Independence, but I'm the spokesperson for the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, or the CIAG. And on this occasion, the various groups, or several of the groups in the independence movement, made a joint statement, and I was in the hot seat to do that. But then in terms of traction, for sure, where we are making really significant traction. I think it's something that's not going away, because the problems that have caused it are getting greater and not lesser.
We'll get into more detail why you are advocating for the independence of the Western Cape. But just to step back a little, in a recent interview that I had with Helen Ziller, who's the chair of the Democratic Alliance, she explained to me in quite a lot of detail why it was impossible for independence to occur in the Cape. However, now that that her own party has progressed with a private members bill, which you're going to have to explain all of that to us, it seems as though she's addressing that impossibility.
And I think we recently published an article. It was in News 24 about 2 weeks ago, where we talked about growing autonomy being now the dominant political philosophy of the Western Cape. And what we try to draw in there, obviously there are different lines. So the DA nationally are probably the most conservative of the groups in that space, and they are advocating for federalism, for control of the police, for control of the railways, and several other things. And clearly they want to fight expropriation without compensation, and no race-based policies. And then past that, then you kind of have these kind of de facto independence. AfriForum now opened a branch in the Western Cape. They're asking for growing autonomy. And then you've got the political parties, the Freedom Front, the Cape Party. You have the Union movement, which is sort of birthed the Cape Coloured Congress.
The what? And then you've Hutful. Just say that again.
Hutful Capetonians movement.
Hutful Capetonians. I mean, those would be cool T-shirts, I'm sure.
Yeah, okay. They're an interesting group, and then obviously at the other end of the spectrum, you've got you've got Cape Exit, you've got the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, and so on. But collectively, we all recognize there's a huge problem that's coming from the dominant political center, which is the ANC, and that the future for the Western Cape is having more power. How much more power? Then there's a debate between us all, obviously, for right independence and secession. The DA are not there yet, but they've moved heavily they moved heavily towards autonomy, and part of that is a change of sort of philosophy. But I think most of that actually is independence is a movement that's led by the people of the Western Cape. It's not political parties other than the Cape Party, who are quite small. This is something that people have led and drawn political parties into. It's not come from a political party. That's then come down to the people, and it's a real people's movement. And this latest move is symbolic of the strength of the movement. There's now forcing political to start taking this movement seriously and to start engaging to some extent with. And I think the DA's position is an interesting one. I've always said the DA have got them of their own making. So the DA see the sort of the provisions, the provisions of the Constitution and the law as absolute, and therefore they look at so they're in a situation where they see problems, they understand the problem, they understand the cause of the problem, they understand the solution to the problem, but they feel that they can't actually enact that solution because something in the Constitution or the ANC or the division of powers stops them. And obviously, there's a certain degree of right in that position, but ultimately, for ourselves, we're much more focused on saying, creating the political reality in the ground, saying, look, you know what, let's not get too wrapped up on what this particular line in the Constitution says or that line in that particular act it says. Morally, there's a real issue here, and actually, the country is going to the dogs, and we've got to save ourselves. And actually saying, oh well, it would have been lovely to have done X, Y, and Z, but we couldn't, isn't really a very, very sensible solution. It certainly isn't the solution that the people of the Western Cape want, and I think that's where the DA.
I see, and you've said a lot of things in a short period of time, but let's just go back a little bit. There's a thing called a private member's bill, which the DA is now going to be taking presumably to Parliament, where they're going to ask that it's not just the president, but also the premier who can call a referendum in a province. Is that where it all begins?
And it's a little bit more absolute than that. So the Constitution, both the National Constitution, Clause 1272F, and the Western Cape Constitution, 37.2F, allow the Premier of the Western Cape to call a referendum. Or in the National Constitution, other premiers too. So the constitutional right for premiers to call a referendum. But the National Constitution was 1996, and the last amendment to the Referendums Act, which is the legislation by which that would be enacted, was in 1992. So you've got a scenario where the Constitution says call referendums, but you've got a law that says only presidents can call referendums. So the law itself is unconstitutional. So this is now rectifying that law, and actually there isn't really any option for Parliament. I'm sure they'll fight over this, but there isn't really any option. It's in the Constitution. It's the law just must be made constitutional, because that law is unconstitutional.
That's good, because I'm sure even your supporters would have said, well, the DA can try everything they like, but they do not have a majority in Parliament, so they can't enact it. But what you're saying is that the law already exists. You just have to almost clear up some of the residue.
Sure, the constitutional right already exists, and now the law must be made constitutional. So there's a process, and obviously there is that this right will become law. There's a question that says, how does that happen? Do the ANC not Parliament and basically allow this act to pass through without too much trouble, or do they choose to defy the Constitution, vote against the act despite the fact that it's a constitutional right, and force the DA to go to the Constitutional Court, who would then have to mandate Parliament to fix the legislation? So I guess there's an easy way and there's a hard way, and I presume there is a third option, which is that the ANC could seek to change the Constitution to remove this right from the Constitution, but that would be quite an extreme move, and one that probably wouldn't be in their best interest.
All right, so we take it one step further. Before you can have, or the advocates for independence of the Western Cape can enact that, you need to get things clear in the law that you're allowed to have a referendum called by the Premier. The President is clearly not going to be calling a referendum in the Western Cape for independence, but you think that Alan Winde might?
Well, I think that the DA. So let go back to that part of that conversation that said, hang on a second, in calls for greater autonomy, there's a whole variety of positions that different groups hold, and at this point in time, perhaps the lines between them isn't really the crucial thing. The DA themselves are keen to call referendums in the Western Cape. They may not be keen to call it on Cape Independence per se, but they are keen to call referendums in the Western Cape. And in fact, when Helen Zille was interviewed about 3 weeks ago on Joe Emilio, she made it clear at that point, although this statement hadn't been released, she specifically was talking about the independence movement. She specifically said, we support the independence movement's right to call referendums, and actually we support fixing the bill, and we support calling referendums once we've fixed the bill. So I think there's little doubt that the DA will be calling referendums in the Western Cape to try and get more autonomy. What's going to be in those referendums is still a source of debate.
Okay, so I think we understand it now really well. Certainly I understand it very clearly, and anyone listening to this presumably will as well. Point one, you need to get the law cleaned up to make sure that the law and the Constitution are aligned, and that is this private members bill. There's an easy way and a hard way to go along these lines. If the hard way would be to go to the Constitutional Court and to enact it, the very hard way would be to change the Constitution. And that's what the ANC would presumably also consider at some point. So that's point one. Point two is that the DA is doing this not to call an independence of the Western Cape referendum, certainly not at this stage, but to look for greater autonomy for the Western Cape. And from your advocacy group, what you're hoping for is that in time, once the law is fixed, you can actually call for that independence referendum. Have I got that right?
Yeah, largely. So I think one of the fascinating things with the Referendums Act as it currently stands is that the referendum doesn't have to be just on one question. So I think what is a referendum on general autonomy for the Western Cape, and that's likely to have lots of different questions. And we would push very strongly for independence to be one of those questions on that referendum. And I think the DA have already said they're very keen for control of the police, they control of the railways. You would hope there would be some question about race-based legislation, about expropriation without compensation, and then the DA want federalism. So you suspect federalism at some point is something they want to test. And of course, there is a position between federalism and independence that doesn't often get talked about, and that's confederalism. And that will also be something that certainly from our side we would alongside independence and federalism.
So this is a step in the right direction, but it's quite a long road yet. How long might it take in your best case scenario for your ultimate objective of independence to be achieved?
No, so we envisage that there'll be a referendum on Cape Independence within the next 2 years. That's what we envisage happening, and I think you look. The Constitution was written in 1996. This issue that the DA now rectifying has been here for 25 years. They didn't just wake up yesterday and decide it'll be a great idea to rectify this. This is a function of the huge pressure that they're under in the Western Cape, where people are increasingly demanding independence. When we last spoke, we had that poll, which was August last year, and at that point, 36% of Western Cape wanted Cape independence. The majority of DA voters wanted independence, and a lot of things have happened since then. So politics, Western Cape politics and national politics isn't occurring in a vacuum, and it's not it was always necessarily the DA's. That to a certain extent they're embracing this, and to a certain extent they're being forced into this by the political climate in the Western Cape. So we don't consider ourselves powerless in this process, anything but. We have worked very, and the independence movement has been critical in this announcement, albeit it's not our announcement. It would be naive in the extreme to think that the DA just thought of this all on their own. This is a reaction to the political climate of the Western Cape.
Phil Craig from the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. Thank you, Phil. That was well put, indeed. Much appreciated. I'll send you the links and everything when it's up.
Fantastic.
Good.
Thanks, Alec.